Who the hell can wait till morning? Talk now at latenightsportsradio.com.
Millionaires are being made all season long at DraftKings.com, America's favorite one-week fantasy football site. One-week fantasy means no season-long commitments. Play whenever you want. Got a player who's hurt? No problem. Injuries won't derail your shot at victory because it's like a new season every week, so you're never stuck with the same players. Pick your team in minutes, and you could be on your way to winning huge cash. This season, one listener turned $10 into $5,000. Another turned $2 into $10,000, and a new millionaire has been crowned nearly every week this season at DraftKings.com. You could be next. Imagine winning $1 million in one day just playing fantasy football at DraftKings. Head to DraftKings.com now and use promo code Spreaker to play free in the $10 million Fantasy Football World Championships. DraftKings.com. Bigger events, bigger winnings, bigger millionaires. Enter Spreaker now at DraftKings.com. DraftKings.com. That's DraftKings.com.
1, 2. Check me out right here, yo.
Thank you for joining me for another edition of the Bob Sullivan Show here on LateNightSportsRadio.com. If you would like to call in, the call-in number is 585-633-7487. I am joined tonight by Jared Bourget from Hoops Habit and Valley of the Suns. Gerald, how are you doing tonight?
I would be doing better if the Suns would be able to win a close game, but other than that, I'm pretty good, Bob.
Yeah, do you think it? Hornacek did a great job last year with this team. What do you think the problem is? Do you think it's a coaching issue? Do you think it's a personnel issue? What do you think the main issue is right now with the Suns?
I mean, I think a lot of it comes back to their youth. I mean, overall, this is a really young team. They just switched Alex Len to the starting center, and he's, only 21 years old. Markieff Morris and Marcus Morris, they're both really talented players, but they've got some growing up to do, and the same goes for Bledsoe. This is, unfortunately, one of the league's most undisciplined teams. They're in the top 5 for technicals. I don't know if you saw the game against the Spurs they had the other night, but they were down 3 points with less than 2 minutes to play, got back-to-back technicals that extended the lead to 5, and they ended up losing in a really close game. And then tonight they just fell apart in double overtime. So I really think their youth is a problem, and that reflects the coaching. But, after the job that Hornacek did last year, it's hard to fault them too much on that.
Does this Suns team, it kind of reminds me with the immaturity at times in the technicals of a young Blazers team from the early 2000s. Do you see any similarities between these two?
Oh, definitely. I mean, the maturity is not that high here. I mean, their locker room leader is PJ Tucker, a guy who, he got into trouble this past off season, and the best thing about him is his emotion, and it's also the worst thing about him because he cannot contain his reactions to, bad official calls, turnovers, mistakes, that type of thing. And if that's the guy that these young players are looking up to for inspiration on the court, that's going to be a problem. And it's definitely a reason why this team gives so many free points. The Suns' defense is bad enough as it is without giving, the opposition 3 points from the foul line from technicals.
Do you see with the Morris twins, do you like having both of them on the same team? I kind of thought it initially having both of them on the same roster was kind of and signing them both to 4-year contracts. I think that could be a little bit of a recipe for future problems there.
Right. I mean, it's kind of funny because when they first traded for Marcus Morris, it was, they were in the middle of the second worst season in franchise history. It felt like a PR move, just like, hey, we have twins, come watch our twins play basketball. But they've actually kind of developed into very good players with different skill sets, which is why I'm sort of a converted believer in having both the twins. especially because they both were not playing very well until they started playing together again. These guys have played basketball together their whole lives, so not having each other around, I think, definitely played with their heads a little bit. Keith has developed a really dangerous mid-range game, and he's become a pretty consistent scorer for this team. And then Marcus is he gives a little bit of a kick off the bench, and he's a better three-point shooter than his brother. So they bring different skill sets, and I like having them around. But, like the rest of this team, they just need to mature a little more and learn to control their emotions and their tempers.
If they're gonna make a move this but before the trade deadline, who do you think the most expendable piece is on the roster?
That's tough because a lot of other teams would love to get their hands on Goran Dragic. He's the guy that has drawn the most interest for this team around the league. He's going to be a free agent this upcoming summer. But, mention trading the Dragon to Suns fans and they go ballistic because they love this guy here. And he's usually their best player. When last season he won Most Improved Player. He was third team All-NBA. He had just a tremendous season carrying this team to 48 wins when Eric Bledsoe missed half the year. He's definitely their most coveted piece, but from a Suns perspective, they'd probably want to unload Miles Plumlee now that they just traded for Brandon Wright. He would make the most sense to be on the move.
With the addition of Brandon Wright, I was kind of confused with I know the Celtics are trying to get every single draft pick from now until the end of mankind, but Brandon Wright, I felt like that was a good piece to have for them, along with Sullinger and maybe Olynyk down the road. Size is kind of an underrated thing to have, and he's efficient. He, at one point for most of the season, he was 80% from the field. What did you think of that trade from the Celtics perspective, and how do you like it from the Suns perspective?
Well, from the Celtics perspective, you're right. They're stockpiling draft picks like, nuclear warheads in the Cold War era. It's just, they're going to have like every pick in the mid-teens in a couple of years. But, Wright hadn't really cracked the rotation for them under Brad Stevens. They have a lot of centers. I was kind of surprised how quickly and easily they moved him. Because, Wright was shooting around 77% with the Mavs to lead the league. He's a very lanky finisher who works well out of pick and rolls. He can throw down alley-oops, like they're nothing. And I thought that would be something that the Celtics would like to have for the future. But at the same time, maybe Danny Ainge didn't want to re-sign him this summer and spend a chunk of change on him for a full-scale rebuild. So the Celtics, it's an okay trade for them. They have enough pieces at center, and unfortunately that first-round draft pick that they got out of it through Minnesota is most likely going to turn into 2 second-round draft picks, just because of the protections that are on it. So for the Celtics, not a big trade, not a great trade. But for the Suns, I like it a lot. Wright is a very natural fit in Phoenix. They might need to run a few more pick and roll sets with him because they actually don't run pick and roll schemes as much as they used to in the past. But Wright's a guy who he likes to run in transition. He can finish alley-oops. He's very efficient inside, and he's a great shot blocker, which even with Len now in the starting lineup is something this Suns team needs.
As far as, the NBA goes, these protected, first round, second round, I saw somewhere that the Clippers have some pick that the Lakers get if it's 51 through 55 protected. It's like, okay, at what point do we need second round picks protected? They never need to be protected. Some of the protection rules are just ridiculous. Like, it's protected, it's lottery protected for 5 years, then it's 1 through 5 protected. I think you can protect it for 1 year and that's it. They can't be cashing in on a draft pick 17 years down the road.
It definitely makes for a more convoluted process, that's for sure. Like with this Minnesota pick that the Celtics got through the Suns trade, it goes from a first top 12 protected this year, top 12 protected next year, and then after that it's a second round pick in like 2017 and 2018. It's kind of hard to keep track of, but I guess it also makes for entertaining circumstances, I guess.
Have you ever gone to the website that has all the draft picks that belong to teams over the next, 10 years? It's like a complete, it's just a ridiculous library of, asterisks. I mean, there's like a point where it's like 5 asterisks with an explanation of the protections of a pick. And it just gets completely ridiculous that there needs to be a website for that.
Exactly. It's those websites should come with a warning, like do not read while operating heavy machinery, because it's enough to make your head spin. There's just so much that's going on. But for some teams, it's not that hard. Like for instance, the Knicks, who finally have a draft pick for once in like the last 2 decades.
Well, and the other thing is those websites should say like, only read this if you plan to spend 10 to 15 minutes on the toilet. I mean, that's really the only time you have time to read the entire thing.
Exactly.
How frustrating was it at the beginning of the season when it was, Suns, Kings, Pelicans, were all kind of these teams on the rise. And no matter how well you were playing early in the season, you have that thing going on. You're like, ah, crap. Well, the Thunder, they're going to get Durant and Westbrook back pretty soon. And there's just almost no hope at that point. It's just like, well, I guess we're going to be competing for an 8 seed again, at best, maybe a 9 again. How frustrating is that?
It's very frustrating, and it was frustrating last year, even when this team was, they were the pleasant surprise of last season, winning 48 games when everyone expected them to be competing with the Sixers for, the tank job for a high draft pick. But it's even more so now this season because the Suns, they got better over the offseason. They added Isaiah Thomas. They're seeing huge improvement from Alex Len. They just added Brandon Wright to, add a backup big that this team needs. But it's just tough because the Western Conference is a bloodbath. I mean, the playoff picture in the West is like the opening 25 minutes of Saving Private Ryan. It's brutal. And the 2 teams that you thought would regress in the Houston Rockets and the Memphis Grizzlies, they're actually better this year than they were last year. So the Suns definitely are looking over their shoulder right now at the Thunder, like, please let this Dion Waiters trade ruin them, please, because it's who are they supposed to beat out? Once the Spurs get healthy, they're not going to be 7th in the West. Once the Thunder get back into their groove, they're not going to be 9th. It's just really tough because they have an 8-game home stretch coming up. But the teams that they play it's a brutal lineup. They got Cavs, Clippers, Bulls, just a bunch of very good playoff teams, and that stretch might define the season, whether they're going to be 8th or 9th again.
What do you think the most important thing is for teams in the West? Like, when it's constantly 9 deep, as far as a conference goes, what's the most important thing? Is it bottoming out and just getting draft picks, knowing that it's going to be almost impossible to get a, LeBron or Melo in free agency? What do you think the most important thing is for small market teams in the West to do?
For a small market team in the West, it really, it kind of depends, because a team like the Suns with a young core that just added a bunch of draft picks in the last few drafts, the goal should be the playoffs. At this point in the season, I saw someone write about this the other day, a Suns writer, about how the Suns might be better off losing from here on out it's way too late to be tanking if you're that close to the playoffs. I mean, the Suns are still in the 8th spot, but for a team like the